It's 9:08 on the 6th of May, 2022. Good morning and good evening. Welcome to the MTT News of the Week.
Good
evening. All right, yeah. This week we are going to be talking about Roe versus Wade. Some big news coming out of the US about a potential overturning of the Roe v. Wade abortion law, constitutionally protected, I suppose, ruling by the Supreme Court. Then we will talk about, of course, we have other things to discuss, the virus, the death statistics of how many people have died of COVID around the world in the last 2 years has been released by the WHO. I'll also give some insight on Beijing and how it's going right now with the virus. Then we will be discussing Ukraine, a bit of a mini update, not too much to report on the situation there. May Day happened 5 days ago, so we'll talk a bit briefly about May Day, as well as the Access Bill that we missed from last week. It's a bill being passed or has been passed in Congress, an anti-China bill, the Access Bill. I'll talk about that. And then actually at the end, we will go into a deep discussion about Roe v. Wade. So we're going to cover everything else first and then talk about Roe v. Wade at the end. And if you are watching, if you have any comments, if you want us to cover anything, or I don't know, if you have something to mention or things that we should discuss, please do comment and we'll mention it. We'll discuss it. And also, if you're watching and you haven't liked or subscribed or pushed the notifications bell, please push that. And yes, thank you for joining us. So, Jen, I think you would like to start with virus news. You've got lots of virus news stories for us. Go ahead.
Yes. So obviously this week, the news that's been coming out of this week, as we can see, can just be summed up with one word: chaos. We've talked a little bit about this artificial kind of chaos idea before, and it's right now we're getting to the point where, well, to just start us off with, the official statistics of the U.S. Total death of COVID has already reached 1 million. So we've talked about. I remember, Richard, you make an anecdotal point sometime in the past few weeks about if the death of COVID in the United States reaches 1 million, it will be a big deal. But within all of the chaos that's caused in this week, it almost just doesn't seem like that significant and noticeable anymore. It's like there's so much distraction and chaos and just tolerance and this kind of desperation that's caused by everything, right? So like the official number is 1 million, but again, articles are coming out saying that the number of death is massively underreported. So once again, we're kind of so essentially, it's the two-part conversation of the virus and then political economy, right? An objective thing would affect the political economy, and then the political economy would affect how we deal with that said objective thing, right? It's the dialectical kind of circle. So let's just stick to the virus front for now, for the sake of simplicity.
Sure.
We'll move over to the political economy part. Well, COVID, as new variants of BA 5, 4, 5, 6, whatever, Omicron, BA, etc., is coming out, and it's very concerning because has shown the ability to bypass immunity that is developed by previous infections. What does that mean? Well, it means that the human body builds up immunity when you get infected by X virus, and then you don't get it again for years on end, right? But now it is able to evade that, which means that not only is it for the people that's reinfected, but for conventional what's called deactivated vaccines as well, where you kill the virus essentially to then inject it so that the human body can build the immunity to it. So then this puts everyone in a very, very peculiar situation that we have been essentially emphasizing ever since around October of last year, which is that the mRNA vaccines have their problems with, and now we see it with the European Journal of medical journals talking about hepatitis, right?
Mm.
And one can only assume that the amount of dosages that you do get will correlate to how severe your hepatitis will be, because statistics, you know. And then on the other hand, we have the conventional vaccine that, in the face of this new variant, no longer works.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So essentially, what we're left with is that the only situation, the only solution really is a zero COVID policy that China, DPRK, Cuba is doing. That's essentially our only option now. And any kind of solution to this in a already kind of severely infected country needs to be it needs to occur on the level of the masses of people being able to support the sick, and then disinfecting environment with bleach and whatnot. That's not happening. Like, as somebody who has lived in the United States for many, many years, it's just straight up not happening unless people organize that themselves on a large enough scale. And then, as kind of on related news, we have the massive spread of just a mysterious new hepatitis around the world. Right, it was first discovered in a children's hospital in the UK, and now it's like literally everywhere: India, Canada, etc., etc., etc. And then to top it all off, the what's called, let's look at the CNN article. What is called the H5N1 bird flu is massively spreading in the United States. And has confirmed to infect humans. That's what the CNN article is about. And is killing birds, including the American bald eagle, all the way down to chickens across 27 states. That is called how you destroy food supply. That's literally what that is called.
Right.
Yeah. So, this is the objective news of the week. So, any thoughts, Richard? Because this is one hell of a way to open up the show.
Yes. So, a couple things to say. It's pretty worrying. If you're talking about the outbreak of a bird flu or bird flu-like virus in the US, I think you guys already had, what was it, H1N1 in the early 2010s, which under the Obama administration, they, thousands or millions.
That's the swine flu, pig flu.
Swine flu, right. So loads.
I remember when I was in China, I was like in 5th grade or something. We got called out of school, all lined up in like the playground, right? I was in elementary school. And these doctors just came and gave us, every single one of us, a jab of a vaccine. And then we just went
Right.
And it was a very orderly kind of thing that didn't cause any hustle. We got pulled out of school for like half a day. That was it. And but here in the US, I hear like comrades and friends tell me about like how they literally just had to tank through it. They almost died. They had like 100+ degree Fahrenheit fevers for weeks on end, and some of them even like decide to flee to Mexico. That is not a joke. To escape from. So that's typical Americanism.
So what I wanted to say was that if you remember that the H1N1 virus already sort of ravaged livestock and the food supply back then, and you're talking about the current thing with the bird flu ravaging the food supply, potentially killing chickens and whatnot, and you've also got the war, the conflict in Ukraine, wheat supply being affected, fertilizer being affected.
Exactly.
So it seems really, really, it seems like a really dangerous situation when we've already had COVID-19, so the US is not seeming to take that much of a concern about the spread of new viruses, let alone the old virus. Yeah, I think you would have thought that the lesson would have been learned by now. I mean, I know that the Obama Obama regime wasn't perfect, but at least they did have the virus prevention sort of office or special unit in the sort of White House cabinet.
That's the thing. From people that I've spoken to in person who suffered through that, that wasn't even that good. I can dig up like
And I think they
look
set
up
it up.
like
I think they set it up
H1N1
after.
CDC video. Literally,
Right.
all they did was an African American guy came out dressed in suit and tie, talking about just wash your hands. We will go. We will push through this together.
Right.
As one people.
Right.
Just like this 3-minute video. That's all they did.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sure. Like I said, I don't think they were perfect, but at least they had that office. I think I'm not sure on the history of this, but when that office was set up, but I do remember that it's famous that Trump disbanded that unit that was set up.
Yes, but yeah, in
nonetheless,
2018, 19-ish. That's correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So just coming back to the death toll, yeah, you were mentioning the death toll. So the WHO has released an updated version of the death statistics. We actually mentioned this a few weeks ago when it was already coming out, but there was actually objection from India. So India was kind of arguing with the WHO as to how they were counting these statistics. So the full number is nearly 15 million people. So globally, 15 million people over 2 years have died because of the virus or because of circumstances surrounding the virus. So, for example, like someone couldn't go to hospital or there was no treatment for them because of the strain on the healthcare system. So they measured excess deaths, so above the average, right? So so 15 million more people died during the pandemic than would have in normal times. So over the last 2 years. But what was particularly interesting in this is obviously how much higher official statistics from certain countries were compared to the WHO's statistics. So India, I already mentioned, India was already quite angry with the number that the WHO was going to report. So a third of the excess deaths, 4.7 million, were from India, according to the WHO. But the Indian government's own statistics are only 481,000. So what is that? Nearly 10 times less. I mean, I don't think it's any surprise. I don't think anyone's surprised by the fact that a lot of the people, a third, died in India. I mean, it's a big country. They still have lots of poverty. And if you remember, like, I think it was last year, they had that example of the collapse of the healthcare system, the sort of worst case scenario where people were like taking oxygen in the street and they were closing the hospitals. They had that. So it's not surprising that 1/3 of the total deaths are from India. And they also have a big population, right? 1.3 billion, 1.4 billion. But I think, go ahead.
To bring it to the kind of American context, you were talking about the scarcity of food that's caused by the Russia-Ukraine conflict. And there is also the scarcity of fertilizer. Prices of fertilizer has went up by 3 times here in the United States. And combined with, as we talked about in our last episode, the massive inflation, right, of the first quarter, first season of the United States economy. This is already not good, but there is more coming. As in, China, in order to maintain its zero COVID strategy. Last week I talked about it from like a national imperative, national interest perspective from the Chinese perspective. But like this week, let's truly talk about it, because, May Day and all that. Let's talk about it from an international perspective for a moment. China's industry is essentially the world's industry, in short. That is not an exaggeration.
Yeah, I think it's accurate.
But with all these COVID things, and especially with centers of logistical transportation such as Shanghai, right, in these kinds of lockdown situations, what we are seeing is simply, the like every part of the production chain of the world is getting affected, even though like the internal circulation of China seems to be doing fine. China, in this position as a socialist nation and as the industrial powerhouse of the world, does have a responsibility and does try to keep up production as much as possible. But even though it's doing its best, despite disinformation, hacking,
Yeah, yeah,
et cetera, by malicious entities. Uh, it is still causing chip shortages, car parts shortages, to the
yeah.
point where if you were to be looking into buying a car, like right now, go to a dealership, talk to people. How quickly can you get a car on average that you want? First hand or second hand, doesn't matter. You're looking at a half a year of waiting until you can get your hands on a car. And United States is the nation that's built on cars, right? If it is this bad for cars, then like, please just like imagine how bad everything else is going to be. So
Okay.
this there's food scarcity, there is fuel problems and
Yeah,
prices, obviously, and there is now machinery problems, core
sure.
industrial processing machinery
Yeah,
problems,
yeah, yeah,
compounded with logistical problems, people's health massively declining,
sure.
and all the other civil, political, economic chaos. We're getting to the economy
Yes,
now. We're about to get to the political. Combined with all the political chaos that we haven't even
yes.
mentioned. Yeah, that's why I say that chaos is what is happening, right?
Definitely. I think this is a good description. Definitely chaos. And I think something to add on that one is that the timeline for these things. So these things don't finish in sort of like 2 months or 3 months. So there's a long term. There's a delay, a lag on these things. So, for example, the food stuff, the particular sort of failure to harvest and the failure to distribute fertilizer, that will only manifest 6 to 9 months from now, when the harvest is not as fruitful as it will be for the Russian Ukrainian conflict. And then yes, like inflation, there's a long delay. So people's spending power after they run out of money a few months from now, we see the real sort of deep effects, and then the political effects, as you say. But before we jump onto the next point, I just want to go over some of the statistics again for the deaths. So just on the misrepresentation between official state statistics and what the WHO says. So Mexico was only twice as low. So the government's official tally is only half as bad. Egypt, it was 12 times over. So the Egyptian government, let's say one unit, the WHO said is 12 times higher. Pakistan, 8 times higher. So the officials were 8 times lower. But what's interesting here, so this is obviously from the New York Times, and they obviously say negative things about the Russian statistics, but they, oddly enough, one of the few countries that was precise was Britain. British statistics were actually pretty much on par with the WHO. But I mean, that's it's ridiculous, because they were good at measuring the deaths and being honest about the deaths, but the death rate is still so high. And what's glaringly missing from the New York Times article is they don't mention the Chinese statistic at all, whether it was ill-reported or low. So what I'm guessing is that the WHO's estimate is probably close to the Chinese government's estimate. And that's obviously embarrassing for the New York Times, who can only paint China in negative light, because obviously, I mean, the statistics, was it 6,000 or 7,000 dead compared to, with a population of 1.4 billion, compared to the UK, which is over 100,000, the US, which is at 1 million, India, 4.7 million. So the fact that it's not in this article tells me that the statistic must have made China look good. Yeah. If you want to then move on to the sort of where we're following from this, I don't know if there's any. Well, I guess we're not going for virus stuff, and the political thing, like you mentioned, we want to talk about political chaos. I think you're talking about Roe v. Wade, which we've saved for the end, right, Jen? Oh, did you get any of that? Okay, I'm assuming
there was some
delay.
connection loss
That's
due
okay.
to
That's okay. Yeah.
probably the VPN again.
Yeah. That's okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
So let's move on to You want to talk about Ukraine? Let's do a quick update on Ukraine then.
Well,
you got me there? Yeah.
Yeah. So overall, I'm sorry, I can't really tell if you're currently
No. Go
speaking
ahead.
or
Go
not.
ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, cool. Sure. So currently, not much is happening militarily in a sense that Russian forces have fully encircled the eastern parts where most of the Ukrainian trained and experienced soldiers are, and has fully encircled them. And now it's just a slowly but surely kind of process of besiegement, right? Complete encirclement, the kind of and then just like destroying one Ukrainian position at a time, and destroying and or forcing a surrender out of one group of Ukrainian forces at a time, right? And the encirclement is fairly complete from the maps that we are able to see. So one of the interesting things then is that the apparently DPR and LPR forces have found out that the Ukrainian troops, especially the Nazi kind, use opioids. They use literal hard drugs in pills. What's called combat pills that they issue to their soldiers to keep them going. Can't say I'm surprised because this is something very typical of fascist nations. Nazi Germany does it, feeds their soldiers on cocaine. And Imperial Japan also does that. They call it the Soul Awakening tablet. I think if you were to transliterate it to English, as some shit they used towards the end of World War II. And the U.S., Vietnam War and all that, they always have crack cocaine for their troops. The CIA always supplies that to the U.S. American GIs. So, can we really say we're surprised? So
I think they already wear SS lightning bolts. They already have the Black Sun. They already do the weird salute. They already worship Bandera. Yes. So I think they're just following their heritage. Their heritage. If they want to be neo-Nazis, neo-fascists, then they should. It's a cultural.
Nazis, yes. There are even reports of them forward HQs of Ukrainian forces with witchcraft symbols painted onto the walls or whatever, which I just found absolutely comical. What?
That's their culture, man. That's their culture. So we have a comment here from Yomtom about this a captured Canadian general. So this is widely reported in a number of things. I just checked to see who reported, if it's any, if it's reliable, whatnot. So apparently this guy's called Trevor Cadier, a Canadian general, and he was captured trying to escape Azovstal. This is in the last week or so. He's a lieutenant general. If I'm not mistaken. Lieutenant General.
So that is the bottom of the barrel. That is the mystery itself.
Right. So, but obviously I think it's a bit of a messy story. So April 5th, he apparently retired after more than 30 years in the Canadian forces, traveled to Ukraine to help fight Russia, and but he was being investigated by military police for alleged sexual misconduct in the past year. So this is, let's take a look what else we got here. But apparently it's true. He traveled to Ukraine at the beginning of the month with the intention of joining the Ukrainians as a volunteer or mercenary, if you want to call it that, an internationalist. But it's correct. He was there, and there are videos of him.
More like a imperialist international fighter. As they so kindly describe to ISIS, international fighters. That's what he is.
Yes.
Um,
So yeah, apparently this is true.
Yeah.
Apparently this is true. I mean, if I can find it, if you
Well,
search
hey,
for it.
like, from all of this, one thing I'm inevitably concluding out of all of this is that Russian sources, even just like Telegram Discord group speculations, are like unironically a lot more reliable than Western mainstream media when it
Yeah.
comes to this whole thing. Because there's been this rumor of NATO generals being stuck in the Azovstal bunker for like the longest time now. It's been going on for weeks. And if you remember, like, we couldn't confirm or deny otherwise because we don't have official confirmation. But now we do. So
I think,
all things considered, fairly reliable.
Right. So it seems that there's a number of outlets reporting it. I mean, the Ottawa Citizen, so that's a semi-official newspaper then from Ottawa, does report that he did leave and he was in Ukraine. And then other reports show him as being actually having been captured. So yeah, that's pretty bad to have I mean, he was a general less than a month ago, a lieutenant general less than a month ago. So pretty much as close as you can get to being an actual general.
Okay, just in China, there's some speculations and based on some messages from the United States and Poland that Poland may be interested in taking the western, like 1/3 or 1/4 of Ukraine, whilst Russia takes like eastern Ukraine, as we know, like where the rough boundary is, like nowadays. We will see. We will see because from a strategic perspective, Poland has always been the gateway that Russia and the Soviet Union has been invaded through. Napoleon fought through Ukraine to get to Moscow. So did Adolf Hitler, right? So then, with essentially the era of geopolitics returning to become mainstream, right? The end of history has ended.
Yes.
Okay.
History restarted.
So we're now at a stage that we're still looking at things geopolitically through essentially military and resource power. Some stuff these days, with the American sanction, NATO sanction on Russia, the world economic stage just straight up looks like the days of mercantilism. Like, with this amount of trade protectionism, you might as well say that we have returned to like the mercantilist pre-Adam Smith era. I mean, this is just the capitalism has deteriorated this much, truly. And what we're seeing now is return to geopolitics, and Germany is having a rearmament. And is trying to dump away all its 70s Cold War equipment for some cash to fund their new land army that they're going to build. And then Poland being this kind of extremely unstable political kind of, environment that's like stuck between the tectonic plates of the Western European and the Russian Eastern European kind of civilizational spheres, and there's a lot of like extreme nationalism and return to monkey type stuff. So yeah, Poland is not the most rational actor. And if they were to pull something like that, and if Russia were to feel like threatened by it, that should be a surprise to no one, because fool me once, fool me twice, fool me thrice, like then curse words, right? As the saying goes.
Right.
So this is literally the third time that this European politics stuff is geopolitics stuff is playing out. So yeah, we'll see where this goes.
Sure. Just on the war, I mean, we're only mini update. I think you already said this, Jen, that there's not much has changed on the ground. So I'll just put some things that I've just noticed over the last week. So, as a brief sort of cover, the advance in the east by the Russians is still taking place. They are creeping. It is slow. I think that's a correct assessment.
Yeah,
Going through the
exactly.
Donbass,
Exactly.
but they are, numerically there are more Ukrainian troops there, and that's where they're dug in. So the fighting would be the slowest there.
Mhm.
But from the Western
Yeah.
perspective,
Yeah.
whether you watch the BBC, or read the New York Times, or Sky News, or various sort of Western sources, is there's a
Oh
almost
boy.
there's almost it's almost a universal tendency not to mention any of the advance's details, because the advance is happening. They'll say that it is happening,
Yes.
but they won't say this town was taken, that
Mhm.
town was taken, this city has fallen, this city has been surrounded, that river has been crossed. And I think this is a specific narrative objective, in that you have to make the advance sound slow in order to paint the Russians as falling or failing, and they're missing this deadline, which no one ever set,
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
May
Yeah.
9th.
It's like
So
yeah, it's
the
like a
point
war reports
if the
of
point is to one second, if the point is to make it sound slow, then you can't mention town by town or city by city. You can't give anything a name, because then it gives it the idea of momentum. If they go, "Oh, Russia
yeah.
captured
Yeah.
three
Yeah.
towns,"
Yeah.
there's
It's
momentum.
yeah, this reminds me of like nationalist China's war report correspondence during the Chinese Civil War, or
Mhm.
Imperial Japan's kind of last leg against during its last days, its war report against the Soviet Union and the United States. Or on the other hand, you had Goebbels, right, the infamous
Yes,
Goebbels radio
Goebbels.
talking about, "We have achieved victory in Stalingrad." So it's like, we have gained victory. We have eliminated 10,000, 20,000, a million enemy soldiers. But then the
Yeah,
line is getting pushed further and further closer to home.
yeah, yeah, and
Brilliant.
yeah, right,
Yeah,
right, right.
that is. Yeah.
Right, right. And just on that, on the thing about, I mean, the other thing to mention is that the attacking of railway substations has been one of the main efforts, or main sort of developments this last week or 2 weeks, is attacking the substations, sorry, not subway stations, substations that power certain railway lines and links, so
Uh-huh.
that they can reduce the inflow of arms. So, like any tanks or tracked vehicles or even heavy guns, to travel them by road to, from Lviv to the Donbass, would is almost impossible. Like your most standard tank tracks
Yeah,
would
that
not be
is
able to
quite
drive that
important
far. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
because
So
when the snow has melted in Ukraine and that kind of terrain, the ground is literally a swamp. I've seen videos of Russian workers driving a tractor, trying to just navigate through that. It's like the treads are literally like pedaling in liquid mud.
mhm, mhm.
It's
Right,
like the
right.
thing is like swimming. It's not
Yeah,
driving.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, rail and roads would be
Yeah.
the only way that you can move
Right, right,
large
right, right.
columns of heavy anything
Well,
through. So
yeah,
yeah, this is quite important.
right. I mean, I'm not even talking about the mud, just the distance. So even if you could drive a tracked vehicle, you just wouldn't drive. You would never do that. The tracks would wear away
Right,
before
because
you.
all the parts,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
wear
So
and tear. And like I see a lot of people like saying, "Oh, Russia, doing a terrible job with the armored vehicles." Well, something you don't understand is that even U.S. armored vehicles sometimes are even worse in this regard. Why? Well, every tank before you leave and every time after it just like been on a drive and came back to the base, you need a team of more than a dozen, more than 1 dozen engineers to perform like for 24 hours to just check on the thing because there's
yeah,
so much complex machinery in there.
yeah, yeah. And
And
they're not designed to
tracks,
drive
treads,
very well.
sprockets, etc., wears out extremely quickly, and
Yeah.
those things run out of fuel extremely quickly.
No, they do. They do. So
So
yeah,
yeah, that's just what armored vehicles do. So yeah.
great. So let's move on to just a quick one. So it's two quick things. So May Day. Okay, so obviously it was May Day, International Workers' Day on May 1st. So happy May Day to you, Jen. Happy May Day to everyone who was celebrating it around the world. Just a quick one. Obviously, the reason we have May Day, I was reading an article. It was actually written by Rosa Luxemburg talking about the history of May Day. And believe it or not, May Day was, I guess we could say, invented or first fought for by Australian workers. So 1856, and then later adopted by Americans and the rest of the world, fighting for the 8-hour workday. So just a quick point. The 8-hour workday that we now see as like a prison, 9 to 5, we have to remember that was actually won through struggle, and to even have an 8-hour workday is a blessing, a historical blessing. So yes, thank God for May Day.
And many places across the world still aren't able to do that. In the U.S., in order to survive, you still need to work like 80-hour, 70-hour weeks. The struggle is definitely not over.
Right, exactly. So let's not forget how we got here, and onward to the 4-hour workday. Who knows? But then the next piece is the Access Bill. So I wanted to mention this. So there is a U.S. Congress member, Andy Barr, right? He's the Republican from Kentucky, actually. And he got his bill passed, which is the Access Act. This is on the 27th of April. So the reason I want to mention this is mainly because of how ridiculous the name of the act is. But the act is essentially an anti-China piece of legislation, which demands that the State Department submits ongoing reports to Congress on China's support for Russia's, special operation in Ukraine. And so initially, the State Department will have to submit a report within 30 days of the enactment, so in the next 30 days then, and then every 90 days after. So it's obviously it's a legalistic mechanism to build this narrative of an anti-China so that there's anti-China legislature in Congress, which I'm sure there already is lots of. But that's what this act was. So now the State Department has to legally submit reports about to what extent China is supporting Russia right now. But the reason it's so ridiculous is the name. So it's called Access, AXIS Act. So there's obviously two things which are already controversial about that name. So Axis is obviously the name of the bad team in World War II, right? The Axis powers, Nazi Germany, Japan, and Italy, right? That's the Axis. So there's the first sort of historical slurring, insulting China by calling it the Axis Act. 1 second.
Here's the thing.
Wait, hold on, wait. And then obviously it also references 2003, the Axis of Evil from George Bush. But the acronym itself, AXIS, is Assessing Xi's, so X, Interference and Subversion Act. So it's just, I take my hat off for them to the word cross.
Americans love their acronyms.
Right.
I mean, from what I remember, like your American sergeants and officers spend like basically half their lives memorizing all the acronyms in the U.S. military for no good reason. Here are a few interesting things about this. In China, the Chinese government just take a dialectical neutral stance on the Ukrainian conflict. It is, in fact, the Chinese public, like the people, that massively supports Russia's anti-imperialist efforts and so on. The Chinese people are also very nostalgic of the Soviet Union, etc., etc. And so, when we see things like the CSTO, this kind of bringing back of the Soviet heritage, right? So last week we've had or was this week? We had the Soviet, Russian cosmonaut in the ISS going outer space with the Soviet World War II victory flag, performing a spacewalk, and then we have all your Soviet iconography of both Russian and LPR troops in Ukraine, etc., etc. It's so if you're going to go with that logic, then you should truly sanction every single, like, all 1.4 billion, like, Chinese person alive. That's like what they should legitimately do if that logic were to hold true. And surprisingly, not sanction any CPC members or state-owned institutions, because that's not their doing. Russian embassy sets up like a trade thing in China where they sell like goods like candies and whatever, and it gets bought out like under like 30 minutes during a live stream. With the Russian embassy people, all their chocolate, all their candies, just gone. Like the kvass just like deleted in 30 minutes, right? That's not the government's doing. That's just the people and and their opinions. So I don't quite understand. Like especially it's this American kind of Orientalist obsession that all Oriental despots must command and oppress their people to do everything, and those peoples are brainless drones who can't do anything on their own.
Right,
So that's just
right. That's exactly so inherent in this title, right? Assessing Xi's interference, so implying that China is just run by one guy and that's it. There's just exactly mindless hordes,
right.
mindless hordes of Chinese people with no opinions living under the emperor. That's what it implies, right? Assessing Xi's interference, right? That's what this implies, right? So let's just on one thing we forgot to cover, just briefly, 1 minute. I'll just cover it quickly. Is Beijing, of course, the lockdown. We haven't had lockdown in Beijing. We have 60% of subway stations are closed, and over the May Day holidays, restaurants were closed, but you could still go out to the park. You could still meet in open public places and order delivery and stuff. So and museums are still open. I went to the railway museum. Riveting. And since yesterday, we've had work from home for the eastern side of the city, so Chaoyang, which is where the CBD and all that stuff. That, to be honest, we're just continuing with this testing. So we haven't had any major lockdown like Shanghai yet. We hope we don't have that. It hasn't happened. Food supply and delivery, everything else is pretty much running normal. Can't go to the gym, should work from home. But the guys on the western side of the city also are working from wherever they like, office.
Go buy yourself some weights and resistance bands or whatever.
Yeah. I've got a stationary bike. But so that's Beijing. I just want to cover that. Nice. So let's go on to Roe versus Wade. So the bombshell. So I've actually got I've got the actual document here. If you want to take a look, let's take a look at it. Let's bring it up here. Let's bring up the actual document.
Let me pull up. Oh, okay. You can do that.
Okay. You see it?
Oh, perfect. Well then. Yes.
Here we go. So this is it. This is it. Supreme Court of the United States, first draft. Okay, then you see all the Chief Justices. This is from Justice Alito. So he's the one who wrote it. Circulated February 10th. Okay.
Immediately, I want to say just that, even for this kind of thing to be leaked, it means that somebody close to the work environment of the Supreme Court is intentionally leaking it. Because, to quote Sir Humphrey Appleby from Yes Prime Minister, the state of the ship of the state, Bernard, is the only ship that leaks from the top. So, that's what this is.
That's brilliant. That's absolutely brilliant. Okay, nice one. The only ship is Bernard is the ship. The state is the ship that leaks. Is the only ship that leaks from the top. Nice.
Yes.
I mean, first thing I want to say is it's skew. Look at that. What is that? They've got are they on typewriters here? What's happening? It's
probably yes. Yeah. No, I had to look at the dates to make sure it was 2022.
No. It's just a scan. It's obviously the way they scanned it was skew. Nonetheless, on the first page. Yeah. So, this is from Politico. So Politico actually released it. So we can't read the entire thing. It's 98 pages, but it goes through as all legal stuff goes through. It's really long and long-winded and whatever. So let's just cut to some pieces here. So at the time of Roe, obviously Roe versus Wade, 30 states still prohibited abortion at all stages. In the years prior to that decision, about a third of the states had liberalized their laws, but Roe abruptly ended that political process. It imposed the same highly restrictive regime on the entire nation, and it effectively struck down the abortive laws of every single state. As Justice Byron White aptly put it in his dissent, the decision represented the exercise of raw judicial power. Okay. So, yeah, I guess that critique then is saying that it's a comprehensive law, which is, I guess that's the part where they're saying is restrictive. It's imposing across the entire, it's the same restrictive regime.
Immediately, right off the bat, there's a few things then. One is the idea of the states' right. Like, come on, that's just some antiquated nonsense. Like, why here in the U.S., why should there be a different driver's license system office for every state? Just have one driver license system, please. And this, like, treating the states as a legal person. Yes. Like, no, that's stupid. But no, on the other hand,
this is
on the other hand, this kind of it is a complex legal kind of back and forth question. And here in the U.S., at least on Twitter and on Discourse, like my phone, I turn it off and put it somewhere right now, but my phone has literally been blown up with like, hey, what's the move? Is there any protest? Roe v. Wade got revoked. We need to go onto the streets. Like for a whole 2 days on my phone, in the notifications, just nonstop local groups and people saying that kind of stuff. That's not what this is. It's a bullshitty legal process in a bullshitty society where nobody there's no sense of respect or community or looking after people, and it's this kind of then you have this further scrambled legal system with the states' rights, everything. But then it doesn't mean that it's a one clear cut ontological metaphysical thing where where it's just like individual choices, absolute individual choices, or zero individual choices, and absolute patriarchy. That's extremely undialectical, even for such a messed up and tangled situation. So
what I want to say then is that exactly, if this, at least on the first page, if the argument is at least even beginning from the states' rights angle, and the fact that the second extract here says that the Constitution makes no reference to abortion. I mean, the original Constitution, if that's what they're referring to, also makes no reference to abolishing slavery. So like this idea of states' rights, what's in the original Constitution, these are pretty flimsy things that you could then unravel so many other things with. That should definitely not be overruled, and this one definitely should not be overruled either.
I do think then this is really just a discourse gimmick that is used to create something that we here at the MTT has repeatedly said, a mutually reinforcing echo chamber, where the panic of one side, the error, the stupidity of one side causes the panic of the other side, right? So we have the stupidity of the American legal system and triggering trauma of women who were absolutely traumatized by the kind of absolutely brain dead, stupid American patriarchal system, right? Who like back in the 50s wouldn't even fucking allow women to like wear pants. That's how stupid things were back then. And those people are still alive today. And of course they would be very disturbed by whatever the fuck this is. But then the response then goes back to like the absolute, like basically like getting a wrong interpretation on this by saying, oh, this is will at the return of like the Handmaid's Tale, absolute patriarchy. right?
Sure.
Which then gets the conservatives to say, "Oh, this is just all liberal propaganda. Look how they're destroying our country." And so then this circle just keeps forever going, right? And so amidst all of this chaos, and I suspect it's the Democratic Party who is interested in doing this more than the Republicans, but still. For them to pull a massive MREC on the American society and the nation, Roe v. Wade, it's like one of those self-destruct buttons of the American society. Me, as a Chinese person who came to the United States and heard all this heated discussion about abortion, and I talked to all my friends and family in China, both men and women, and we were all just dumbfounded, we've never heard of this. What is this? Why is there this morbid fascination with it? It should just be like a sensible societal thing, have abortion, but have it responsibly, right?
Yes,
Be respectful towards all parties, etc., and be respectful towards human life. That should be the end of the conversation. It should not be that complicated, but here we are. Yeah. So very early on, notice it was like this self-destruct button, and it seems that the establishment, amongst all this chaos of food, virus, and society, industry going to shit, has decided to push this self-annihilation button. So that's what
I think in some respects, this is, I don't agree with this idea of overturning it at all. But if we're talking about the attention of American people and the attention that the American people pay towards all the propaganda, the war propaganda right now, waging against, I guess, the whole world, sort of imperialist propaganda. So this does turn Americans' eyes towards domestic issues, which in that sense is, if you guys can go and deal with this stuff and fight each other out over this and not be waging wars for everyone else, then I suppose that's a good thing. But again, this whole thing is ridiculous. Yeah, the idea of having,
but understand they're only doing that because they're being defeated in a humiliating way by literally everybody across the world. By Russia, by China, by Iran, even by PPRK, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
If they can't get their fear-mongering national pride from that, well then focus on this.
Right. I mean, it has been so the Republican Fox News and whatnot have focused entirely on how this was leaked rather than what is being said. And that's why the whole thing about the Democrats or someone on the Democrat side obviously leaked this so that the midterms are coming up and they can have a referendum basically on Roe v. versus Wade.
Come on, people, dialectics. Look at all the parts. Don't overemphasize any parts. Look at the whole thing.
Sure. I'm just commenting on what's been said. But yeah, so
I understand.
That's what's been said, that the Democrats have obviously stirred this up so that they can then win more seats or hold seats in the midterms and maybe even then for the election, to turn this into the issue, because obviously the economy is a disaster. So yeah, I mean, the Democrats are looking very bad or very weak right now because of the economic situation, if inflation and whatnot. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. To just respond to our comrade Sanchez here, the whole thing about fear mongering. Well, it's actually a rather important talking point. Not just a talking point. Fear mongering is what's his name? By American realist strategist John Mearsheimer or Mearsheimer. The professor talks about he's like this make friends with Russia but be anti-China American realist strategist guy. Talks about in his book Why States Lie, how do leaders lie to their own people. Talks about different kinds of lies. The biggest kind is fear mongering. fear mongering is the primary way for states to mobilize its own population to do something that they are unwilling to do. Because deception is not telling the whole truth, right? I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, right? So if you take away the whole truth part, and then you take away the nothing but the truth part, you're left with a lie, yeah? And then in order to motivate people to perform that lie, what you do it through fear mongering. And that is the definition in like the kind of political strategy perspective. And so, this is like, I don't know if our comrade here is aware of this or not, but this is absolutely like the quintessential case of
scaremongering.
Like, capital letter, capital F fear mongering, as defined by Professor Mearsheimer. So, yeah. That's what this is, and I just want people who are watching this to not fall for that. That's all.
Right. Yeah, I'm curious to see what happens on this one over the next week. We got some comments here, so perhaps this will all be over in a moment, right? If they just voted on it and they passed, because there is a congressional, it's a congressional, there is a congressional motion right now that Schumer has put forward, so that everyone who's against Roe versus Wade will then be open, like exposed. So making it awkward for them. But I think the statistic is 80% of Americans support Roe versus Wade. So, it's I think it's a done issue, to be honest. I'd be surprised if where this goes in that sense. But that's all we have time for this week. So I have to now commute to the other side of this desk and work from home. So I will.
All right.
I'll catch you guys next week.
Okay, you have fun.
Okay, cool. Let's see where this goes. And thank you everyone for watching. And please like, subscribe, share, notifications bell, and all that stuff. And listen to our podcast and perhaps you can subscribe to our Patreon, please, so that we can get more news inputs rather than just the New York Times. We'd like to buy the Financial Times, but it's $40 a month. So we need some subscribers.
Yes.
And they will show you all of their articles for free. Well, not for free, but Okay, cool. Thanks, guys. I'll see you.
Only in Minecraft. All right. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.